Mr. Vice President, I mean, this is a bit impromptu. I know you just returned from Essequibo and you're preparing to move on to Linden. But I want to talk to you quickly about your visit to Essequibo. It's generating a lot of traction, and we've had a series of meetings. Just give us a quick update as to how those meetings went.
Well, it went extremely well, and I'm hoping that we can do this more formally. I know this is very informal, but since you wanted a quick comment on what took place on the trip to Essequibo, I acceded to the request, and I think you would have followed all of the engagements. And the thing about the engagements we've had, we made them public. They were broadcast live so people could follow. We didn't attempt to hide the true nature of people's feelings towards the government, nor their comments about issues that they're confronted with. Often governments do not like to face that sort of thing. They operate in a sterilized environment. So when they make a trip out, they can cut and splice tapes and then show only what they want the population to hear. But our approach is that since we have nothing to hide and we are committed to people on the ground and improvement in their lives, so even the rawest comments can be made there, unsterilized, unedited, so that the people of this country can follow the conversation. And that happened a lot. I was told on social media, a lot of people tracked what was going on. They even had an incident where one person said that there was a businessman who blocked a road, and when they tried to open the road, he fired some shots in the air. So someone called me from Essequibo thinking that it happened at my meeting, because the person who was relaying the message to us that they wanted the road open spoke about shots being fired. And so that was how closely people were following what was happening and the comments that people were making. So, for the last year and a half or so, since we assumed office, we've spent a lot of time indoors trying to put together the plan for the 5 years in a manner that will cause the transformation of people's lives, as well as address some of the day-to-day issues. It's not been an easy task. We found very little in terms of plans and even less in terms of financing for the long-term transformation of the country. In addition to that, there were many problems we had to fix, like spending large sums of money illegally in the period after the no confidence motion, a lot of liabilities that were left for people who supply services in that period, fixing those liabilities, addressing the 100 billion credit from the central bank, and a number of other issues. So we've been heavily engaged in that. And I must say, we're seeing the light of the day now. A lot of our plans are not at a stage where we are on the verge of tendering or starting to implement. And these will have long-term benefits for the country, like the 6 hospitals, regional hospitals, not just regional, but hospitals in the rural areas, a new hospital for children, maternal hospital, upgrading New Amsterdam and Linden and Bartica and West Dam and Suddy and the 4 hinterland regions. All of those plans are now put in place. We have the security financing for most of them. They're on track. The highways to expand the access that people have, the comfort on the highways, as well as putting in the infrastructure for more business, the gas to energy project. A lot of work has been done, which is often behind the scenes. Simultaneously, we have tried to fulfill our promises. because that's very important to us. So when I told the people in Essequibo Coast we had fulfilled about 80% of what we promised, I heard APNU said it's not true. But I can enumerate. I don't want to talk about all the taxation measures that we have returned to status quo ante, that we've removed, and like the children grant and everything else, and the old age pension and the scholarships and the things we promised. So it is true, we have done quite a bit. We're not satisfied that those are the only things we need to do. We need to do much more. But what is sacred to us is fulfilling the promises we made to the electorate. And we are diligently pursuing that. And then thirdly, we had to do this all, the planning for the long term, the short term fulfillment of promises, all in an environment with COVID, which we had not anticipated. And we had to, and the last government didn't leave us with much to address the pandemic. And so we had to address that. So it's been a full period, almost I keep saying to people, this is like one long night or one long day for us. But we did not get to do the things on the ground. The president went out a lot. He's been very, very active on the ground and in the planning process. A lot of the ministers went out. But we still had an issue of not bringing large numbers of people together because of the pandemic. Now that the restrictions have been lifted, we can now hit the ground once again in earnest. And that is why I went to the Essequibo Coast, meeting people. They've been asking me to go there for a while. And I thought it important to give people explanations. Like we did in 2015 when we lost the elections, we went on the ground and told people why. So we had to explain to people the challenges we face now in government, a bit of what APNU left us, and how a bit about their philosophy, their negative attitude in government, and now in opposition. And we wanted to tell people about the new challenges that COVID caused, like the cost of living and what we're doing, etc. So that is what happened on the Essequibo Coast. So we focus heavily on giving information to people. First of all, about ensuring that our democracy stays strong, or that we build on that there is no room for drifting backwards. And so they're going to see aggressive action through new laws and strengthening of our democratic processes. Secondly, how we are fulfilling the long-term goal of changing lives. And then also thirdly, about the cost of living impact, which has hit the country hard because of the shortages around the world, the increase in freight, the war in Ukraine, how all of these are impacting on our lives. So I saw one news report saying Jagdeo acknowledged it. We didn't acknowledge it. We've been talking about this from day one. We've been in the forefront talking about the cost of living increases and the cost of production increases in some cases, and how it's affecting people. And because of that, we have put together like $5 billion in the budget to address cost of living. If we acknowledge it now, it meant that we wouldn't have put money in the budget to try to address some of its ravages. And we still have to decide jointly with people in consultation how we utilize those funds. But we know it will affect people, and we know until prices normalize, we have to assist people to overcome this, because that's the nature of our party. So I spent a lot of time talking about that, telling people in the Pomeroon, for example, how we're going to help with their flooding. So since we got in 2 new pontoons with long boom excavators to impolder land, we're doing some work, some special contracts there now to impolder additional lands. COCA, a charity to improve a drainage system, to improve that, dredging of the mouth of the river, dredging the other rivers. A lot of work has been, that sort of work, new hospitals in Region 2. I met with the rice farmers and went through with them in great detail, spent 2.5 hours about all of these issues. So the Essequibo trip was to bring people up to date on what the government is doing and trying and committing once again to helping people to address the cost of living issues and also the cost of production issues as we move forward. I wanted also to talk a bit about the oil, because there's so much rumors about oil and oil money and how it should be spent and how it shouldn't be spent. So we did a bit of that on the Essequibo Coast. So I hope that to do this in Linden, in many parts of the country, with other ministers and the president, every one of us reaching out, so that people understand where we're going and what the challenges are.
And if I may remind you that the Essequibo has a special place in my heart. That is where I came from.
Yes.
I've been in contact with a lot of persons over the last 2 days you were there.
Yeah, sure.
And I think the excitement that you're hearing from them, you talk about jobs,
yes.
you talk about the new hospital at Anna Regina, you address issues that the Gold Scholarship students and so forth were facing. And you mentioned, Mr. Vice President, that $5 billion in the budget for to deal with cost of living in response to claims that the government is now talking about this. But the government has been addressing this even since 2020, because you've had a number of interventions since assuming office.
Yeah, yes, I agree with that, absolutely. And the tasks have been, or fulfillment of our promises has been exacerbated by the COVID, or in a way that mitigates against us achieving as early as we wish some of the things that we had intended. Nevertheless, just to give you an idea of the magnitude of the problem we face, take for example jobs in this country. Under APNU, before the no confidence motion, we had already lost about 30,000 jobs. Under APNU. In the mining sector, they increased, they put the value-added tax on machinery and equipment, for all machinery and equipment, for agriculture, mining, etc. Production plummeted, and the economic activities and employment shrunk in that sector. In the forestry sector, with production again there collapsed to almost half of what we were doing in 2014. Retail trade shrunk. Almost every sector except rice shrunk in the agricultural sector, and that is not due to the government effort, because the government said that's private business. They increased the tax on fertilizer, on pesticide, they put the VAT on fertilizer, on pesticide. The only reason the rice industry did fairly well was because the global price for oil and gas was very low. It was about $30 per barrel in 2015. Now it's over $100 a barrel. So the cost of input was a bit lower and the cost of fertilizer. But APNU had no care for the sector, absolutely no care. So about 7,000 sugar workers were laid off, 2,000 Amerindians. In the public sector, many people lost their jobs of a particular, some others were hired, but many lost their jobs too. So in the period, in the no confidence period, maybe a post no confidence, another 5,000. So you came into office with a net deficit of jobs of 35,000. And then they shut down the country totally the last 3 months before the elections or so, totally. That also caused maybe another 35,000 people, 35,000 to 40,000 people to lose their jobs. Waitresses, everybody, people who are working, taxi drivers and stuff. The country was in a shutdown. So you came into office with about 75, 80,000 people unemployed or looking for employment. And that is why we had to quickly, whilst addressing the pandemic, putting in the capacity for testing, buying the protective gear, buying masks, expanding the ICU, bringing in oxygen so that people could address it. A number of things, hunting down and buying vaccines and getting our people vaccinated. Whilst we were doing that, we opted to keep the economy open. And that opening up or keeping the economy open allowed a lot of people to be re-employed and to get their jobs. So much so that in some parts of our country today, that there are labor shortages, skilled labor shortages, and even unskilled labor shortages, like in regions 3 and 4 mainly. The problem, since we had committed to creating 50,000 jobs, the problem was in the other regions. And that is why we set aside an initiative in the last budget to hire this year about giving temporary employment to about 8,000 persons. And Essequibo Coast, we rolled out that too. So leaving in Essequibo Coast, 800 persons in the next 3 weeks who are not working today will get jobs. So you can help to alleviate concerns there, assist with the income at the family level so they can better cope until we have structurally changed the job market in Essequibo. And we're trying to structurally change it by co-investing, setting aside money in this budget to co-invest with business so you have more private sector investment in job creation in this region. And the reason we have to do so is to incentivize private capital to move to these regions outside of just everyone wanting to come to 3 and 4 now. We have to get them to move to 2 and 10 and 5 and 6 and the hinterland regions. So that is what we dealt with there. And then also grants. We've set aside enough money for small business grant this year, the scholarship programs to train more of our people. 20,000, 30,000 of them will be trained to prepare for the job market of the future. So these are important things. You mentioned about cost of living. Imagine APNU saying they're concerned about that. And they're the ones who put VAT on water and electricity. Contrast that with what we did. We removed the VAT on water and electricity. We now, although all these costs have gone up and fuel prices have gone up, we made a commitment as a government to keep water and electricity prices at the same rate as they were, or they are now today, without moving that. That's a massive subsidy from the government, just to keep that so that it doesn't push us up, it doesn't push up cost of living higher. So when they talk about these things, they have absolutely no credibility. I don't want to enumerate all of the things we have done, but as you correctly pointed, returning the water subsidy to pensioners, increasing old age pension by 40%, returning the children cash grant and now taking it up to 25,000 and extending it to the private school kids too. All of these things supplement family income at that level, and more of our people are working today than on APNU. You go and see the job market is vibrant, particularly in some parts of our country. So these are very important issues.
And you touched on the whole issue of cost of living and what is being said by APNU. And we saw efforts now to move to Parliament and to submit a motion on the whole issue of cost of living and what should be given to people and all sorts of things.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder if the people of this country will buy in, because there are some people who will on the face of it say support it. And they have to know by now that you cannot trust APNU. Look at the promises they made in 2015. Anyone who looks at their manifesto, they said within a month they will double old age pension. Within 1 month of getting into office. They promised to expand help to our children. They took away the $10,000. They took away $10,000 then, claiming we couldn't afford it, right, for per child. and now wants to give every house person in Ghana 200,000. So we have increased it to 25,000 per child, but we haven't spent a cent of the oil resources as yet. So their money is like, if you do what they're suggesting there, we will have to spend every cent of the oil money that we get and eat it up, give it to everybody. We can't spend it on training people and educating them. We can't build the hospitals and the schools and the new roads that you need or the power plants of the country. So you're eating up every cent you earn. And it would still not be enough because they want to give, like, they said now it come down from 5,000 US to 1,000 US a year per person now, right? So now this is, but that will be probably nearly $500-600 million, and you don't have anything else to do. Any long-term development of this country. This is the same APNU philosophy. I had cause to point this out when I look at their budget for the last 5 years. We examine it when they were in office, that on each of those years they spent less on capital expenditure than we budgeted in 2014. So, but on the recurrent side of the budget, the current side, it increased by 77%, because that's where you eat up everything. So we spent, the capital side of the budget is where you build infrastructure for the future. You create new industries, you create new wealth. When the oil goes, you have something to turn back to. So this is the same old thing. And I can't imagine any sane person, any sensible person falling for that. That same philosophy, living above your means, caused Guyana to collapse economically by 1992, when we became the second poorest country in the hemisphere, poor just around Haiti level. It's the same economic philosophy. And I suspect Norton, if we're coming from that era, remembers that fondly, that you can eat every cent that you earn and even more than you earn. So you have to borrow to eat now than to prepare for the future. That is not the People's Progressive Party. That's not our philosophy. We transformed the country from what we took over in 1992, an insolvent country, to today the most viable economy, I will say, in this part of the world or any part of the world. Our debt figures are one of the best in the world, better than almost any developed country in terms of stock of debt and debt servicing as a share of the budget or revenue. So we are going to plan for the future in a manner that doesn't destroy the rest of the country, like I had cause to point out to what happened in Venezuela, Nigeria, Trinidad and Tobago now. The country has a period of boom and then it collapses when oil money disappears. So that motion that they put in Parliament to give people every Guyanese $200,000 is a gimmick. It is a gimmick. It's designed to excite people to think they have money there, but it is not realistic. Now, it is not practical. It's not wise to do that. You can't fund it. It would put us in more debt. It would waste all the money. We can't build the future taking that approach.
One of the other issues I wanted to address with you, VP, is that of, because we saw the AFC simultaneously almost, parroting similar to what the APNU, which is led by PNC, but has said about trickle-down economics and so on. The measures that we're putting in, that the government is putting in, somehow it's not reaching to the poor people. But interestingly, and I think every single Ezekiel and Rice family remember the $9,000 of Black Promise. But I'm seeing the AFC now has a menu of measures that they think could help the rice farmers. How do you respond to that?
Now, let me say that one, I'm happy that AFC is now saying that we should help the rice farmers. Because you recall what they said about the sugar workers on the platform at WIM, that they want to expand the sugar industry. The PPP was lying about closure of estates. they came in office. Ramjatan, the same person who is speaking today through that press release, said we can't supported the closure of estates, supported 7,000 people losing their jobs, supported the zero salary increase for 5 years for the sugar workers, supported the removal of the API from the sugar industry, supported Granger when he said the rice sector is a private industry, supported the increase of the levy at GRDB, supported the increase of water charges and DNI and land charges, supported the VAT on fertilizer, the VAT on machinery and equipment, tractors and combine. So I'm pleased that today he now wants us to support the industry. Up to recently, we went to assist the sugar workers, and they were opposed to it in the last budget. They spoke out against it. So when we try to assist the farmers who face flooding and households that face flooding, they said we want to give money to our supporters. So I'm pleased with this now that they said we must support the rice farmers. It's because we have every intention of doing so, and we have already done so, and not in a convenient way for to score political minds, not from here just to get people to vote for you. It goes back to the heart of what the PPP has always done. We've supported our industries when they're in difficult times. It happened in the bauxite industry. We supported and we continue to support the bauxite industry. We've done it in sugar, we've done it in rice. And we will continue to support the farmers. So although a lot of the menu of measures we've done, a lot of these things, and they're very convenient, they call on you to do things that are already done, we are pleased with that. So we will have cause to say, you are supporting us with a statement, but you will see what will happen in Parliament when we go with the initiatives to support. They will oppose that. So the same thing about the cost of living. How could the AFC talk about cost of living to anybody and recognize that so they acknowledge that it's a global issue, and it's a global issue. At least they acknowledge that. But then to say they can do a better job having done what they did to people. So we are telling us how we don't have a problem with them making suggestions. In fact, we are on the ground to listen to people to make suggestions as to how best we could address this problem without destroying the fundamentals of our future. APNU comes up on AFC with some wild things that they would never implement and they know are unimplementable. They do it for the sound bites and to get people on their side. But any sensible solution that will bring relief to our people and that is sustainable, that wouldn't cause us future problems, then we are prepared to do so. We dropped the tax on fuel from 50%, it was 50% the excise tax. We removed a few days ago. I went to the Escobocos, the last 10 percentage point. And so now it's zero. We did all we can. We removed every tax on that area. We removed the tax on fertilizer, on pesticide, but the prices still went up because global prices have gone up. They will come down in the future. And oil money cannot be wasted. It's not a lot of money. Oil money has to prepare us for the future. We must spend it so our people are healthy on healthcare. Must spend it on their education so more of our people have access to tertiary education. We promised 20,000 scholarships online. But if we find people where we need to do 50,000 scholarships, then we will do it, fund it, because it means preparing and training our people for the future economy where they can earn more. And we will build the schools, the hospital, not schools and hospital, but the highways and the power plants and the ports and all the physical infrastructure and support the industry. So when the oil money goes, these sectors will take over and create the employment for our people, so that we don't have like problems like some of the other countries have, massive unemployment and loss of welfare. So I've seen that. I've seen Patterson saying in the same press release today that we must ensure now in the permit that Exxon has full coverage, insurance coverage. And this guy here, he was part of a government. The man who was heading the EPA, AFC member, and in the leadership, Trotman, an AFC member, was in charge of the sector. He, Patterson, was Minister of Public Works. They issued 2 environmental permits that didn't have the same things he's calling for today, didn't have any such thing. So the 2 permits that they issued, the environment permits, were changed when we issued the Payara permit, environment permit, 6 weeks or so after we got into office. We published the Payara permit. They didn't publish the other one. I would ask every Guyanese to go and check the 2 environmental permits that were issued under APNU. They're 10 documents like this versus the Payara one, which is huge. And they should check what we put in the Payara permit, that now the 2 LISA permits, the LISA 1 and LISA 2, they now have to follow the massive changes we made there. Some of the key elements that we got Exxon to commit to was a cradle to grave ownership and management of their waste that was not in the 2 other permits. So any waste generated by this company, they couldn't give to their subcontractors and say, you deal with that. They have responsibility for it. That's massive change. We then dealt with treated water. How the water that gets used that gets pumped up, that the level of treatment that it has to undergo before it's released, we enhanced that. Thirdly, there was no tax for flaring. They said no flaring policy, but Exxon was flaring. We put in place a tax that has 2 components, a carbon component, one of the first in the world where a carbon tax is going on an oil company for flaring, and secondly, a loss of use fine in the same permit. And then Exxon is already paying for every ton of emission that they put out. They have, through flaring, they have to pay for that now. We don't, no other sector does that. So we put that in place. There are several other new features I don't want to go through. And on the insurance side, let me assure Patterson that the provisions surrounding insurance and controlling in the Yellowtail permit and the Payara permit we issued, but now Yellowtail, would be stronger than any day of issue. Any day of issue. And separately, not part of the permitting process for Yellowtail, but separately, we're working with the companies to secure a parent guarantee that will cover the entire Stabroek block, not LISA 1, LISA 2, Payara, or Yellowtail, but the entire Stabroek block. But that's a separate issue. So Vincent Adams said, he had something, he was thinking about something when he was there, when he was head of the agency, but he didn't do it. We're doing it. So to put out statements today on that sort of thing is just convenient. We either, to believe APNU and think they're sincere, we have to have a state of collective amnesia in this country. I think only then they can succeed. If we, as the citizens of this country, lose our memories. If we lose our memories, they would succeed. But we can't. People, they're so convenient because the memory of them being in government is so fresh. Forget the 28 years, but the last 5 years would give you an indication of how they will operate. It was the most corrupt government, visionless government, a government that had no plan for the future, that was operating in an ad hoc way, that did not defend our interests as a country. And now a government that seeks to take the high road and do an about turn on issues that they have a track record on. Try to lecture us, but that's not going to work. So these are important issues as we go forward. Ignore all of these press releases and these statements and these motions to Parliament. They're all done for the politics, not the substance of it or to help people. They're done for the politics to make them sound more attractive, as though they care for people. They didn't care when they removed the joint services bonus. They said it was a bribe. Well, we restored it. They didn't care for the children or the pensioners or who were getting more free water. They didn't care. Were very arrogant in government and stuff like that. They would have never done what we were doing on the Essequibo Coast. Go and sit all day and listen to people. They were sterilized. Granger would just pop in and pop out. And if Ferguson would go to a funeral and try to resurrect the dead, at a funeral and stuff like that. All of these, the big showy, convenient things, never cared about ordinary people. You find out how many times Holder went to see the farmers. Zulfikar, in the first 10 days in office, visited more farmers and people in the agricultural sector than they did in 5 years. And they're talking about agriculture now and the rice farmers. So it is what it is. The PNC will never change. And Norton went to North America and said, a bunch of idiocy, It's, yes, a ton of idiocy, and only people who are outside here, like, who maybe not been to Ghana recently, could believe this sort of thing. He goes to the US government and lie about different things that's happening here and the racism and all of that, but it's not going to survive. Those things, because we too have our representation there. So we know what they're saying and we're dealing with it.
VP, we could have gone much longer, but
yes.
I know you're just back from Essequibo, and you're moving on to Linden this week. I want to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Sure.
I don't know if there's anything in closing you want to say.
No. The same thing we have to do all across the country that we did in Essequibo. We have to stay in touch with our people, regardless of who they voted for, their race, their religion. The PVP is committed to our country. We've demonstrated that every time we've been in government. We're patriots, we love this country, we work for all the people of this country. We'll do so in a manner, even when there are challenges, in an honest manner. We will explain the challenges to them, but they know that it's sincere and that their interests will be taken care of, regardless of where they live, whether they live in 10 or Region 6 or Region 5 or 2 or the hinterland regions. They have the attention of the policymakers in the BBP.
Thank you very much, Vice President.
You're welcome.